This is our first lesson on painting techniques, simple painting techniques. The first thing you need to do is gather all your materials. Back there I have our basics, and then I also have our Craftsman back here and over here. I also like to have a larger version of black and a larger version of white, mainly because it takes so much time. The second thing I have is I have 2 glasses of water. One will be for cleaning out my brushes. The other will be allowing for glazing and watercolor techniques. So those all come into play. Oops. I knocked you a little bit, but I think it's okay. All right. Gathering up all my supplies. I think for this, we're pretty much going to just use our 2 brights, that's what these are called, with the square tip end. And I'm using a big and a small because sometimes I will need small areas and then sometimes I will need bigger areas. So, you know, all that is very, very important. We're going to start, first of all, I've got our palette right here, and I'm going to put samples of our colors. I'm going to put a little bit of red, and remember, you don't have to use a whole lot. Blue, and yellow. A lot of people think you should use a lot of white, but I tend to go a little bit different. I'll just use a little bit of white there, and I'm going to get started. All right. I'm going to put these out of the way so you can see better what I'm doing. So my palette's right here. Okay, here I have a table that's divided up, board all set up with all the different spots. And the other thing you might see is in some of these areas I put a color because they kind of work better if they've got something on top of them to dry first. The other thing that I did that I added new is this tabletop easel. I think that might be an easier way for you guys to see what I am doing. And what I'm doing right now is cleaning paintbrush. Move it over here. And then I'm gonna get my clean water and move it right over here. If I keep them far enough apart, I won't get them confused. Now that sounds stupid, but what happens is you just get so used to putting your brush to clean it in some place, and so you know that's water and you keep going back to it. All right, here we go. Here's my palette. I'm going to tuck it underneath here so that you can see what I'm doing. Dry brush. I said earlier in the video, I don't know why I called them that, but I call these brights, and they're not, they're flats. So a bright is a different kind of thing altogether. So anyway, we're going to use a flat, and I'm going to get a little bit of paint, and the thing I'm going to do with it is, you see how I'm kind of spreading it out and kind of getting my brush dry, and then when I come up here to paint, I'm going to put these on top so it won't wiggle. It's not technically what they're there for, But okay, there you go with your dry brush, and you can change directions. You can even add a different color. Let's see, I'll add a little bit of yellow. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow in there. Same process, kind of spreading it out a little bit. And then back to it. And see, you can actually see that yellow changing some of these areas into more of an orange. Okay? So there we go with the dry brush. Sgraffito, you actually paint and then you scratch through the surface. Now you can paint underneath it, but for our purposes today, I'm just going to use just a color. Now I'm going to mix some paint. I'm going to mix a little blue and a little red. A little blue, a little red. And I'm going to make something that looks kind of like purple. Then I'm going to get this brush and load it up. It's another flat. See, we get a little bit of dry brush there. That's not going to work for me. All right, let's see if I can just... I'll be honest with you, when I mix colors, I usually do it directly on the canvas. I just feel like I have a little more control over it. So here we go. We're just blending that together. I'm going to take a little bit of white down here. Now we have kind of a dull-ish purple. I think we're going to add a little bit more red to it. Okay, so there we've got it. Now I put my paintbrush aside and I take out my palette knife. With my palette knife, I scrape through the surface. Okay, so you scrape through the surface and you can see the color that's underneath. So that's really kind of cool. All right, now I'm going to go back with my flat. Now wet on wet, I'm cleaning my paintbrush first. Wet on wet is actually a watercolor technique. You put down wet, you wet the surface or you moisten the surface. So that's just our clear water, except it's picked up a little bit of the color from my paintbrush. And then with a wet paintbrush, you can go into it. Gives a very, very kind of washy effect. That's what that word is. All I did was I put a little more water in it. Now, see how it's starting to puddle up on there? If you take a very dry brush, it puddled too soon. If you take a very dry brush, it will actually absorb that water and give you something entirely different. Glazing. Glazing, for me, I do kind of a white on wet on wet, except this time the wet is, I'm going to turn this in a different direction so I can get to it a little bit better. There, and I'll put that under there. Okay. This is a lot of the way I shade. So what I actually do, and I'm going to try and get some more of that purple that I mixed up on there, and I actually just put very, very light layers on top. Now I probably should be using my little brush for this, she said, after it was already too late. Okay. And then I'm going to take a little bit of my white. See, I told you I get confused which water I should use. I'm going to get a little bit of my white. I'm going to put a little highlight up here. Now watch what I do to blend it. I just take that clear water and I go over that surface. And then just get more of that clean water and just blend it out. That white's a little intense. While I'm waiting for it to dry, I'll get some more of this and maybe put a cast shadow. Now, this would be wet on wet. This is already wet. And I'm just putting the cast shadow. Now, for years, you don't have to do this at all. I'm just showing you what options are available. Now, I told you that white wasn't really showing up real well. So you see me cleaning my paintbrush, and then I dry it out, and then I just, with a fairly dry but moist brush, and then I take that out. And now I'm taking a bit of my blue and going back into it very, very lightly and building up that blue. All right, let me turn it to its side. It's a little off because I have my highlight on my side with my shadow. That's never a good thing. Let's see if I can reorganize where that shadow is. I mean, that highlight. So basically what I'm doing, and this is the cool thing about glazing, you saw I messed up. I just take a very, very light bit wash my paintbrush. I'm going to try the littler one. Now remember, you've got a lot of different brushes to work with, so yours will be just a little bit different. Trying to get a little wet, a little white. All right, I just dabbed at it. And then I take my fairly white brush, or fairly wet brush, and I try to lighten it. The nice thing about glazing is it comes in stages. I don't know why I put that there. So that now I'm going to go back to my dark. Over on this side. Okay. I don't know what that looks like on camera, but it's going to do. All right, spatter, drips. We've already seen it. Basically, what you do with drips is you get a lot of water on your paintbrush. You get a little bit of your color, more water, and you just touch it down. I've found that sometimes you can pat it and it'll run. I'm not sure you're seeing that. I'm trying to use simple colors. You can also blow on it. Let's see if I just add some plain water. There it goes. There it goes. Okay, so I hope you can see it. I'm going to try and get some other little drips. Again, lots of clear water. There we go. All right. Honestly, I do a lot of backgrounds with this dripping, and I kind of like it. Now, spatter, you take your paintbrush and you flick it. So you just run your fingers across it and it sprays out the color. Okay, so there we've got that. Now, impasto. Time for our palette knife again. Impasto, you basically butter the surface with paint. So I'm just scooping up a little wad and putting it down. This gives a lot of shadow and texture to what you're creating. The other thing that's cool is once you get that on there, you can always add, and it's dry, you can always put something on top of it. The next one is sponge, and I'm using a sea sponge, but I'll be honest with you, you could use your kitchen sponge. It's going to be just fine. First thing you've got to do is moisten it. So I'm going to take those paintbrushes out there and stick my sponge in here. Oh, by the way, little tip. If you want to buy a sea sponge, don't buy it at a craft store. Okay? Go to the hardware store to get it. They sell them there. And I'm going to add a little more red. See, this time I'm going to do this red, so you can kind of see the difference. Okay. Now, sometimes I take a paper towel and I pat on it to get, I'm going to move my palette out of the way so I can get this in here so you can see it. All right, and I pat on it so I can get most of that paint off, and I'm going to lay it flat I'm trying to get it so you can see it. All right, there you go. All right. And again, I use this a lot for shadows and surface texture. All right, there you go. I'm just showing you what it would look like with two, so you kind of have an idea. I'm going to need to redo all of my paints, it looks like. All right. This time I think I'm going to add a little black. If I can get the lid off. I had it off earlier today. There it goes. And I just pour a little onto my palette. So now I have the black on there. Oops, I moved my setup. There we go. All right. Now, what I'm gonna do with the masking, I've already put my masking tape on there. What this does is it covers up a certain area so that you can paint something new in it. You can paint different colors. You can paint the same color across everything. So I'm going to take a little black. I'll put a little black right there. And then I'm going to take, got to clean that brush. And then I'm going to take some of that red right here, some of that red, and I'm going to paint up here and paint down here. Now, remember when I told you about your the different paints? Do you see this is the less expensive paint, and it doesn't have the same kind of coverage. But you know, if you don't mind going over it several times, which I don't, it works out really well. I'm going to add some more black in there because I'm afraid I got some red. Oh, good. All right, now the trick to doing this is as soon as it's painted, I'm going to move all this stuff out for a second. As soon as it's painted, even before the paint is dry, you need to remove the masking tape. Okay, and that's how you do that particular one. I'm going to move my little easel back up again. I'm going to kind of turn this upside down so you guys can see it a little bit. Soft edge and hard edge. Soft edge has kind of a transparency. It's kind of like a gradient. And so hard edge gives you a nice solid line. I'll tell you, I usually, for the hard edge, I usually super load up my paintbrush. just like that. Okay, for a soft edge, I use a more watery brush. Oh, well, great. That's going to give me a hard edge, too. All right. All right, I'm going to just use a stiffer brush. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Do you see that little fuzzy out there? Let's see if I can reproduce it. Okay, I'm going to try and hold it up. You see how it's softer on the edges there, transitions. Okay, layers. Layers just simply means building on top of. So I have my undercolor. I'm going to add some more yellow so you can see what this kind of yellow does. I'm going to use a thinner paintbrush because I think it'll make a better line. I'm getting my yellow paint and I'm going to go across it. Now, sadly, that doesn't cover up very well, but you get the general idea. If I wanted it to cover up better, I could make it just by simply going over it more times. Waiting for it to dry. See, that's the thing. If you got a blow dryer handy, oh, that was bad. All right, let's just take that one out there. We'll call it a happy accident. There are no mistakes in art. They're happy accidents. Oh, fudge. And then there's me. Okay. All right, I'm going to create this way. All right, there. I'm going to do this. See there? Happy accident. Happy accident. Okay? So that's how you get your layering. Alla prima is kind of like sgraffito, except you have a base color and then you paint another color right over top of it. So, I don't know why I'm getting stuck with this yellow. By and large, yellow does not usually cover very well. I'm just going to try and cover the whole shebang. Okay, time for the palette knife again. And again. It actually gives you a way of drawing into your surface, which can be really kind of cool. Okay. Scumbling. Scumbling works with a stiff, hard brush, and you actually bounce your brush on the surface. So let's see, I'm going to use some white. It usually works best if you use a lighter color over a darker color. And again, I'm blotting my paintbrush because you don't want it really working, and you just keep hammering at it. Great way to make clouds, because you know how clouds sometimes take on the characteristics of the sky behind it. And there you go. Turning it over. So there are your 3 techniques. This is your assignment for this week. I look forward to seeing your assignments submitted to me on Sunday evening before 11:55. Have a blessed day.